Today I'm going to tell you a story so quietly powerful, it will make you question everything you think you know about strength. Set against the wind-scorched plains of the American West, where dust rides the air like memory and the horizon stretches wider than regret. It's a place where survival hardens the body, but sometimes softens the soul. Out there, under a sky too big to lie beneath, destinies collide in the space between silence and longing. It began with a storm, nothing more than thunder rolling over a lonely trading post. But it was enough to crack open a woman's carefully guarded heart and change the course of her life forever. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Liora Ashen had never stood above anything in her life. Not a saddle she was free to spur into a full run. Not a choice that shaped her own road. Not a man who ever asked what she wanted instead of what she would tolerate. She'd been raised in Philadelphia beneath chandeliers and stiff lace collars, in a house where women were polished like silver and set out for display. A daughter was meant to reflect a man's success, not rival it. Roland Whitlock chose her dresses, her tutors, her companions, even the boundaries of her thoughts. What she believed, what she desired, what she feared. All of it fit neatly inside lines he drew. Esther Whitlock enforced those lessons with the quiet strain of someone who had once tried to resist and learned better. At 17, Liora was told she would marry Milton Virek, a textile merchant 20 years older who'd built a steady fortune and wanted a young wife to keep his house in order. No one asked her opinion. The decision was delivered across a candlelit dinner as if announcing the weather. 6 months, her father said. Prepare yourself. When she opened her mouth to object, his stare froze the words in her throat. Women didn't argue. Women didn't decide. They accepted. She endured that acceptance for 7 years. Milton Virek was not cruel, nor was he tender. He existed in a gray space, absent where it counted. He provided a townhouse with thick curtains and polished floors, gowns appropriate for every season, and a household allowance generous enough to impress their circle. Yet warmth never entered those rooms. He spoke of invoices, shipments, expansion, never of longing or laughter. On Wednesdays and Saturdays, at 10 sharp, he came to her bed with the precision of a banker closing accounts. His touch was methodical, his mind clearly elsewhere, as if tallying numbers even while he moved. It was less intimacy than obligation. He climbed in, finished quickly, offered a clipped good night in the same tone he used with the Virek bookman, and returned to his separate quarters without a backward glance. Liora would lie awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this hollow rhythm was the whole of a woman's fate. She read novels in secret, stories Esther would have thrown into the fire, tales brimming with hunger and heat that felt like myth compared to her reality. She told herself passion was fiction, that perhaps she simply lacked whatever spark other women possessed. Maybe she had been carved without that flame. She was wrong. When Milton Virek collapsed over his ledgers at 58, felled by his own heart, grief did not claim her. Relief did. A quiet, trembling sense of release. Beneath it flickered something fragile and bright. Hope. At 31, perhaps her life was not finished. Perhaps she could still become someone other than Milton Virek's dutiful widow. Within 6 months, she sold everything. The suffocating townhouse, the business he cherished more than her, the silverware and velvet drapes, and all the relics of cold Saturday nights. She turned it into cash and bought herself a ticket west, chasing rumors of open skies and second chances. New Mexico territory was dust, sun, and raw wind. She found work at a trading post run by Gideon Thatch, a weathered man who had buried his wife years earlier and hardened with the desert. The place served trappers, the Sandfall men, and sometimes the copper Dragoons riding through on orders. Gideon hired her for her head, not her face. She kept the ledgers straight, tracked inventory, balanced figures with the efficiency Milton had drilled into her during years of unpaid assistance. Order rose from chaos beneath her steady hand. For the first time, the money she touched was hers. The choices were hers. The room at the back of the post was hers. Change did not arrive in thunder. It crept in like dawn. Each month she stood a little straighter, spoke a little firmer, met men's eyes without apology. The men at the post learned quickly that she could outcalculate any of them and would not bow simply because they were male. Respect replaced doubt. Nearly a year had passed when Takai stepped through the door. He moved with the ease of someone who belonged to two worlds and answered fully to neither. A man of the Flint Ridge Band, he worked at times as a scout for the Copper Dragoons, at times as a trader, at times as a guide through lands that swallowed the unprepared. Tall, broad-shouldered, strength held in quiet reserve. He carried himself like the desert wind, controlled, deliberate. His black hair fell long past his shoulders, catching the sun like polished obsidian. His features were sharp, carved by stubbornness and resolve. But it was his eyes that unsettled her. Dark, steady, piercing. When they locked onto hers across the trading post, the room seemed to narrow. It felt as though he saw past the dust and ledgers and plain dresses, past the widow's restraint, straight into the fire she had only just begun to sense within herself. His eyes were shadowed and fathomless, sharp with a kind of knowing that unsettled her. Across the noise and dust of the trading post, Takai's gaze locked onto Leora's and held. The world around them seemed to blur. The clatter of tin cups, the rough laughter of the Sandfall men, the heavy boots of the Copper Dragoons, fading into nothing. The moment stretched thin and taut until Liora felt stripped bare beneath it. As if he could read every hidden ache she carried, every hunger she had buried so deep she no longer named it. She was the first to look away. Heat rose to her cheeks, unfamiliar and fierce. Her pulse hammered in her throat in a way it never had during her years beside Milton Virek. She scolded herself for the weakness. 31, a widow, plain, untouched by true desire. Whatever stirred in her chest had to be foolishness. A trick of the desert, of loneliness, of too much open sky and not enough walls. But the feeling lingered. Takai returned often in the months that followed. He did business with Gideon Thatch in steady tones, never sharp, never sly. He did not bargain like other men. He spoke his price, listened, adjusted when fairness demanded it. Even the most narrow-minded among the Sandfall men grudgingly respected him. And every time, his eyes sought Liora. Not long, just long enough. Long enough to send a slow burn through her veins. There was something in that glance she could not translate into words, yet her body understood it perfectly. Their conversations began with trade. Numbers, supplies, weather patterns. Slowly, without announcement, they shifted. He asked about her life before the territory, about the East, about the woman she had been. And when she spoke, he listened. Not politely, but wholly, as though her story mattered. She told him more than she ever intended. About the townhouse that felt like a cage. About Milton Virek's careful indifference. About lying awake after those cold, scheduled nights, convinced something inside her had been carved out at birth. "Maybe I was made without that fire," she admitted once, her voice barely above a whisper. Takai did not laugh. He did not argue. He studied her for a long moment and said quietly, "Maybe you were never cold. Maybe you were never warmed." The words struck her harder than any touch could have. For days they followed her like a shadow. What if the emptiness had not been hers? What if the absence belonged to the man who had never once asked what she felt? What if the fault was not in her bones, but in the silence she had been forced to keep. 3 months later, the answer came with thunder. A late spring storm rolled in without warning, black clouds swallowing the sky. Gideon Thatch had ridden out to Santa Fe to visit kin, leaving Liora in charge. By dusk, the wind was howling hard enough to bend the roof beams, rain lashing the walls in sheets. The Sandfall men had cleared out hours before. Only Takai remained, finishing a transaction too late to outrun the storm. They sat by the fire while lightning split the night apart. The wind roared like something alive, shaking the trading post to its bones. They talked, truly talked. Not about trade, not about weather, about loss, about fear, about the weight of living between worlds. The air thickened with something neither of them dared to name. Then the silence changed. She could never recall who moved first, only that suddenly his mouth was on hers. The kiss was not careful. It was not polite. It was heat and shock and breath stolen clean from her lungs. Her hands fisted in his shirt as if she were falling, and he was the only thing keeping her upright. Lightning flashed outside, but the real storm broke inside her chest. Takai kissed her as though she were something sacred. His hands traced her spine with reverence, not demand. Every touch asked, never took. Every movement waited for her answer, and her body answered. For the first time in her life, sensation surged without shame. Her breath fractured, her skin burned. She arched into him without thinking, without calculation. She was not empty. She was wildfire, banked for 31 years, waiting for air. In the weeks that followed, Takai moved with the same patience that defined everything he did. He never rushed her, never pressed. He watched her face for the smallest flicker of hesitation and adjusted without being told. Sometimes he would murmur, "Tell me if you want me to stop." And she never did. He explored her slowly, mapping her responses like trails across desert land. He learned what made her breath hitch, what pulled a soft sound from her throat, what sent her trembling. And he seemed to take more satisfaction from her pleasure than from his own. He showed her that her body was not an obligation. It was territory, alive and waiting to be claimed. Not a burden, not a duty, a source of joy. Yet one thing remained unchanged. Takai always led. He chose the rhythm, the pace, the direction, and Liora followed, grateful for his steadiness as she navigated sensations still new and overwhelming. She needed his guidance at first, needed the certainty of his hands, but beneath the gratitude, something else began to stir. A question. What would it feel like to lead? What would it feel like to decide? To take instead of receive? To claim instead of accept? That night, without her asking, Takai answered. They were in her small room at the back of the trading post, the space Gideon Thatch had offered her when she stayed on permanently. She had shaped it into something that felt like herself. Books stacked along the wall, a woven blanket Sylvan Roke had traded her, bright with desert colors, a clay bowl painted in sunset reds, a mirror she could now face without flinching. It was not large, but it was hers. The evening began as most did. Shared food, quiet talk, a glance that lingered too long. Takai arrived at dusk with 2 rabbits slung over his shoulder, dust still clinging to his boots. There was a familiar hunger in his eyes, and this time she did not look away. They ate side by side, spoke of small things, let the tension gather like heat before a storm. And when he crossed the room and drew her into his arms, the air between them was already burning. The heat between them thickened the way it always did. Slow, deliberate, unspoken, they both felt it gathering like a summer storm rolling over dry land. Neither hurried it. Neither stepped back. When Takai finally crossed the room and pulled Liora into him, she gave in without hesitation. There was no awkwardness now, no uncertainty, only the steady blaze that had grown between them these past months. His mouth claimed hers, warm and certain, and she opened to him with a soft breath, letting him in. His hands moved with quiet confidence, unfastening the buttons of her dress one by one, exposing skin to the cool desert air and the warmth of his touch. He undressed her the way he always did, slow, deliberate, almost reverent. Each layer he peeled away felt like a vow renewed. His fingers traced the lines of her shoulders, her ribs, the curve of her waist, memorizing her as if she were sacred ground. Liora felt the tension of the day slip from her bones. Anticipation replaced it. Her body answered his nearness instinctively, ready for what they had learned to build together. When the last barrier fell and she stood bare before him, he lifted her onto the narrow bed at the back of her room. He lowered her onto the blankets and leaned over her as he always had. She looked up at him, at the man who had awakened her from a life half-lived. And gratitude swelled in her chest so sharply it nearly broke her. Then he stopped. Instead of guiding them forward, instead of taking command, as he always had, Takai studied her. His dark gaze searched her face as if measuring something unseen. And without a word, he shifted. He rolled onto his back and, with steady hands, drew her with him. Suddenly, Liora was above him, her knees braced at his sides, her palms pressed against his chest. The change unsettled her. She was intensely aware of herself, of bare skin, of the rise and fall of her breath, of the fact that she was exposed and, somehow, holding the reins. "I don't understand," she murmured, her voice unsteady. "What do you want me to do?" Takai reached up, brushing his fingers along her cheek with disarming tenderness. "That's not the question," he said quietly. Her brow furrowed. "The question is, what do you want?" She stared at him, trying to steady the rush of thoughts colliding in her mind. "What I want?" "Yes." His hands rested at her hips, not directing, only anchoring. "Tonight, I want you to use me however you choose." Her breath caught. "I want you to take what you need without thinking about me," he continued. "I want you to explore, to decide, to find out what happens when you're the one in control." His body lay open beneath her, solid, warm, waiting, not demanding, offering. "Listen to me, Liora," Takai said softly. "All these months I led because you needed it. You were learning. You needed someone to walk ahead so you could see the path. But you're not that woman anymore." She swallowed hard. "You know your body now. You know what brings you pleasure. And I think you're ready for something else." "For what?" she whispered. "For knowing you don't need me to lead. For knowing you can lead yourself. The power you've been chasing, it was always yours." The words struck deep. She remembered years spent arranging herself around other men's expectations. Roland Whitlock's commands, Milton Virek's cold precision. Nights dictated by schedule, a life shaped by silence. Takai was not just offering his body, he was offering her command. "I've never," she began, and faltered. "I know," he replied gently. "That's why we're doing this. So you understand what it feels like to choose. So you realize your pleasure isn't a gift handed to you. It's something you can claim." He lifted her hand from his chest and pressed his lips to her palm. "I'm yours tonight, Liora," he said. "My body is here for you. Touch where you want. Move how you want. Take your time. Or don't. There's no right way, no wrong way. His voice lowered. Only what feels good to you. That's all that matters. It's all that... She looked down at him, at this man who had already given her freedom in ways she never imagined, and felt her pulse race. Fear stirred first. Fear of failing. Fear of disappointing him. Fear of stepping into territory she had never dared to cross. But beneath it, stronger now, was something else. Curiosity. Excitement. A hunger that belonged to her alone. Not something sparked by his direction. Not something borrowed. Something rising from deep within her. "You're sure?" she asked softly. "You truly want me to do whatever I want?" "I am certain," Takai said quietly, his voice steady as desert stone. "You cannot disappoint me. Whatever you choose, whatever you discover, it will be beautiful, because it is you discovering it." He held her gaze. "I've watched you change, Liora. I've seen you grow into your own strength. Tonight, I want you to feel it for yourself." Something inside her shifted at those words. The last fragile wall she had carried for years cracked and fell away. She drew in a slow breath, feeling it fill her lungs, expand her chest, steady her racing heart. She was straddling a man who loved her, who trusted her enough to surrender control, who offered himself not as master, but as canvas. She could do anything. The question trembled inside her. What did she want? She began with something simple. She looked, really looked. Her gaze moved over Takai's body with an attention she had never allowed herself before. She had known him this way, felt him, tasted him, memorized certain paths. But she had never paused just to study him. Now she did. The firelight cast bronze shadows across his chest, shaping the muscles beneath his skin. Scars marked him, thin lines, pale against warmth, each one a story she had yet to hear. His breath moved steady and patient, rising and falling beneath her, as if he trusted her entirely with what came next. She reached out. At first her touch was light, cautious. Her fingertips traced the edge of his collarbone. Feeling the heat of him, the smooth strength beneath the skin, she followed the curve of his shoulder, down his arm, noting how muscle tightened subtly under her hand. His eyes never left her face. There was no impatience in them, only openness. That look gave her courage. Her fingers wandered across his chest, drawing slow circles, pressing here, skimming there. She noticed how his breath shifted depending on where she touched him. A sharper inhale in one place, a low exhale in another. She was learning him. For months, he had studied her responses, memorized her silences and her sighs. Now she was returning that attention. She bent forward, brushing her lips where her fingers had traced, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her mouth. The intimacy of that simple contact sent a thrill through her. His hands tightened briefly in the blanket beneath him when she lingered in certain places, and she realized she liked that, liked seeing the effect she had on him. She moved slowly, following the trail she had begun, discovering new ground. A soft sound escaped him once, low and unguarded, and heat surged through her at the knowledge that she had drawn it out. Before, she had been too consumed by her own awakening to notice his. Tonight was different. Tonight she observed, tested, adjusted. She learned what made him shift beneath her and what made him still. She watched his expression carefully, altering pressure, altering rhythm. Time unraveled. Minutes or hours ceased to matter. She explored every inch of him, mapping his form with a focus that felt almost sacred. At first, she avoided the center of his desire, circling it, aware but deliberate. There was power in waiting. When at last her hand closed there, feeling the unmistakable evidence of his wanting, something fierce and electric rushed through her. He wanted her. His body answered to her. She was the cause. That realization struck deeper than any sensation. She changed her movements, testing what stirred him most, adjusting with quiet intent. His reactions guided her. Not commands, not direction, but honest response. She was not only receiving tonight, she was giving. And the giving held its own intoxicating charge. Eventually, she felt ready to move further. She shifted above him, feeling the heat of him beneath her, pausing for a breath that trembled in her chest. This was different. This was not surrender. This was choice. When she lowered herself toward him, the sensation was familiar, but transformed. It was no longer something happening to her. She set the pace. She decided the depth, the rhythm, the rise and fall. Each movement was hers. At first, she moved cautiously, feeling her way through this new balance of power. But as confidence replaced hesitation, her body remembered what it loved. She adjusted, experimented with angles and tempo, chasing what felt strongest. When certain movement sent pleasure spiraling upward, she did not retreat. She followed it. No voice rose to shame her. No memory of cold, scheduled nights restrained her. Takai's hands rested at her hips, not steering, only grounding her. A steady presence. A reminder she was not alone, even as she led. And in that space, held but not controlled, Liora Ashen finally understood what it meant to claim something as her own. Takai's eyes never left her. When Liora looked down at him, she saw it clearly. Admiration, devotion, and something close to awe. "You're beautiful," he breathed, his voice rough with feeling. "You've always been beautiful. But right now, like this, you're the most breathtaking sight I've ever known." Those words steadied her instead of undoing her. She moved with more certainty, chasing the rising current inside her. The pleasure built slow and powerful, winding upward like heat shimmering over desert stone. She had reached this summit before, but always as something guided, something given. Tonight was different. Tonight she was building it. Every shift of her hips, every change in rhythm, every deliberate motion was chosen, crafted, claimed. The crest she approached was one she had shaped with her own hands. When it broke over her, it was not gentle. A cry tore from her throat, wild, unguarded. Her back arched, her fingers gripping Takai's chest as waves of sensation crashed through her. It felt deeper than anything she had known before. Stronger, clearer. This was hers, not borrowed, not granted, created. When the storm passed, she fell forward against him, breath ragged, body trembling. Takai's arms wrapped around her instantly, holding her close. His heart thundered beneath her ear, nearly matching the frantic beat of her own. "I did it," she whispered, tears slipping free without shame. "I did it myself." "You did," Takai murmured, brushing his hand through her hair. "And you can do it again whenever you choose. You don't need permission. You don't need guidance. Everything you need has always been inside you." They lay tangled together for a long while, still joined, breath slowly evening out in the quiet of her small room. And in that stillness, something settled inside her. She was not the silent, passionless woman Milton Virek had shaped her into. She was not a vessel for someone else's will. She was a woman who could claim what she wanted, direct her own experience, create her own joy. "Thank you," she said at last, lifting her head to look at him. "I didn't know I needed this until tonight." Takai cupped her face gently. "It wasn't mine to give," he said. "It was always yours, Liora. The strength, the desire, the fire. You were just waiting for someone to tell you it was allowed. She drew in a steady breath. And now I know, she replied. I don't need anyone's permission. I can claim it whenever I want. It belongs to me. Yes, he said softly before drawing her into a slow, lingering kiss. It always has. They came together again that night. With her above him once more, no hesitation left in her movements. There was no uncertainty now. She knew what she sought and how to reach it. Her pleasure was not something to beg for. It was something to claim. And when she rose to that height again, it burned even brighter because it stood on certainty. In the months that followed, their intimacy shifted into something balanced and strong. Sometimes Takai led, guiding her through new depths. Sometimes Liora took the reins, claiming control without apology. Other times they moved together without a leader at all, finding rhythm naturally in shared breath and shared desire. There was no hierarchy between them, only partnership, only growth. The change did not remain confined to her room. The confidence she claimed there followed her into daylight. She negotiated firmly with the Sandfall men. She held her ground with the Copper Dragoons. She spoke without lowering her voice. She walked differently, steadier, sure. She was no longer the overlooked wife of Milton Virek, no longer shaped by Roland Whitlock's expectations or Esther Whitlock's warnings. She was Liora Ashen, a woman who could lead or follow as she chose, a woman who understood that her pleasure, her power, was not secondary, but central. Takai had leaned back and drawn her above him. In doing so, he revealed a truth that reshaped her life. The power had always been hers. She had simply been waiting for someone to tell her she could claim it. Now she knew better, and she would never wait for permission again. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for riding with us today. Aviso legal, barra disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.